Okay, so we know that the US is struggling a little bit with the price of the gallon of gas. Many people are looking at their SUVs and thinking, well, what's an alternative? And we've mentioned that these might be good for a commute. What sort of MPG could these things get?
Well, as you know, the price of gas in the US is starting to really spike compared to what we've traditionally been used to. One of the nice things about the Vespa is its economy. That's really the primary reason that people focus on buying: simplicity of operation and economy. Typically, a Vespa can get 70 miles per gallon in the 150 size.
Wow.
Some people get a little more, some people get a little less.
Yes.
Kind of depends on the use, like your car. But compared to your SUV, it's staggering how much better mileage it is. The amount of money it takes you to start your SUV and drive to the end of the driveway will probably get you halfway to work on a Vespa.
That's amazing. Now, many people will say, okay, well, that's really good for MPG purposes, but what about, you know, the weather? I mean, I'm not sitting in a nice, comfortable seat. I don't have my air conditioning on and the radio.
Right.
What's the flip side of that for somebody riding a motorcycle?
Well, the downside of riding a motorcycle in the weather is the weather. You get wet sometimes,
Yeah.
you get hot sometimes. What most people find when they start riding scooters or motorcycles is that they enjoy it enough that until the weather gets really hard to deal with, they'll ride it. And they'll take a rain suit or a waterproof jacket. And also, commutes can be short,
Yes.
and so it's not often a burden. Kind of depends on what you do and how you have to look when you get to work.
True.
So I would suggest not selling your car.
Just in case.
Just in case.
But as you said, these have under the seat, I presume these three have storage space as well under
They
the
do.
seat, just like the Fly. And you can keep an extra pair of shoes or maybe a rolled up leggings that are waterproof. So if
Right.
you do get caught in a shower, you can just stick those on quite easily. Just pull over and take them out. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of folks will carry a pair of rubbers or something that they can put over their shoes. You can bring a rain suit. You can bring, one of the cool things, I had a woman come in and bought one recently. It's called a lap robe. It actually, you put it on like a skirt, you sit on your scooter, and in some cases, some of the models have attachments to the scooter. Cover your whole lower body, then you've got your waterproof jacket or slicker on, and you can be really comfortable while riding in inclement weather.
That's neat. Okay. The helmets that are on offer, can they all fit inside these seats?
Many of the Vespa helmets will fit under the seat.
That's because they make them themselves.
They make them for the purpose
that
of being
purpose.
used by Vespa riders.
Right.
Some of the more common helmets that the general public would use for motorcycling, many of them will fit, some will not. Generally, a full coverage, that is a chin bar helmet, won't fit under the seat, just the shape and size. A lot of helmets have ventilation now, so they're not quite as round as they used to be. They do provide a hook under the seat where you can hang your helmet by its D-ring outside of the seat and then lock it. So although it's not hidden, it's secure.
It's secure. Okay, great. Well, let's move on to the slightly more powerful ones. So Mike, we've seen the 150cc. Essentially, these look the same, but they have a slightly larger engine. Is that right?
These larger scooters look similar to the Vespa that we've already looked at. That's a 150 engine. It's air-cooled, it's light, it's small. These scooters are still light by motorcycle standards, but are considerably heavier than the LX 150 or the S. This particular model is called the GTS 250. This is the GTV 250. If you were to look at the front, you'd see it looks like an old school scooter. You got your headlight down low, got a little Fly windscreen here. You've got chrome handlebars and a different instrument pod. What characterizes the V, however, not just its looks, but its luxury. It's got leather seats. It's got chrome wheels. It's just the top of the line Vespa, very fancy scooter.
Right, that's great.
The GTS, on the other hand, mechanically identical. It has the same engine. It weighs just a tad less, but it's just a little more modern styling. You've got your cowled-in headlight instead of your low headlight. You've got a different instrument pod that includes some digital features. Both of these scooters are comfortable, fun to ride, and they will go up to 75 miles an hour.
So these being larger engined, they have more power.
Right.
If you have a stretch of freeway on your way to work, you'd feel pretty comfortable going on the freeway with this.
If you needed to use the freeway, these scooters are really comfortable and safe at the freeway speeds. They've got larger tires, they have more stability, they're very easy to maneuver and have excellent brakes. One of the reasons that you would buy this one over a 150 is your need to go on the freeway.
Right.
While the LX 150 and the other 150s are freeway legal, their top speed is limited, and it wouldn't be real comfortable to have to be only in the right lane, and perhaps you'd only use them if you had maybe 1 or 2 exits on your commute.
Right, that makes sense. So these being slightly more luxurious, more power, bigger, substantial bike, what sort of price range are we looking at?
The GTS is $58.99. The GTV is $68.99, and what you're paying for there is luxury. You got leather seats, lots of chrome, a very fancy, cool
That's
looking
a
scooter.
$1,000 cow you're talking about.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
If you have been to the supermarket recently, you know that's not
It's
cheap.
expensive.
The LX150, the S, the GTV, also 3 different versions, 3 different prices. The the LXV is $51.99. That's like the GTV, the V standing for vintage in both cases.
Okay.
Styling cues.
Yes.
Leather seat, very fancy, special looking scooter. The LX150, the most popular model, is $43.99, and then the S is $41.99.
Right. So that's pretty reasonable price if you're looking at the alternative to a car,
Sure.
or even just your sole vehicle. If
Right.
you're maybe graduating from school or college and you want to get into something but don't want to afford a car and don't want to afford the mileage that the car affords you, then this is a really good option. This too is a really good option. I noticed just one thing as we've been talking. They say both Vespa and Piaggio. Tell us why is that?
Well, it's an interesting story why these have both Vespa and the Piaggio name. Piaggio is the company that makes them. Think General Motors and Chevy.
Okay.
General Motors is the big company, Chevy is a division.
Gotcha.
In that sense, Piaggio is the big company. They've been in business since since actually the 19th century. Started out as a ship parts builder, went to aircraft, and eventually after World War II had a lot of talented people and engineers and a lot of factory space and no more warplanes to build. So they started building something different, and that was the scooter, the Vespa scooter in particular. They've since branched out. It's the largest company in Europe manufacturing motorcycles and scooters today.
Yeah. So there's a good lineage engineering-wise, and obviously
Right.
the styling is iconic.
Well, the lineage of the Vespa, again, partly goes back to those aircraft engineers that were involved in the early design. If you take a look at the Vespa, on the front end, you'll see that the fork, as it were, is not really a fork. It's a single-sided spring system.
This thing right here.
Exactly, a
Okay.
leading links front end. And that is actually designed from an aircraft landing gear. That's actually where it comes from originally.
That's very interesting. So
So if
traditionally,
you can trust your aircraft, you can trust your Vespa.
absolutely. So traditionally, if you were to turn this wheel, there would normally be another fork on the other side.
Right.
But
You
that's
saw-
just an open wheel.
You saw on the Fly 150 there was a fork on both sides. In other words, 2 shock absorbers. This
Right.
has 1. It's lighter, it's simpler, works just as well.
In terms of the ride, some people ride in Jeeps,
Right.
and they have that bouncing along. Some people ride in Jags, and they have a beautiful, soft, almost like riding on a feather bed. What are these like when you're actually riding them, going over general roads here in California?
Well, a lot of folks want to know about the suspension on Vespas and is it comfortable to ride?
Yeah.
And it is. In general, it is. It does depend a bit on the road. If you ride on the roughest possible road, you're going to have a bumpy ride for a block or so.
Sure.
But in general, the suspension is more than up to the task. One of the reasons, I've actually had a few customers tell me that they preferred the Vespa over other scooters they had, mainly because they put better quality suspension on the unit.
I think that's a main feature that I've noticed, that the Piaggio Vespa name equals quality. There
Exactly.
are some other mopeds and scooters on the market that aren't perhaps up to that same sort of level of engineering.
Vespa has a big reputation to protect. Their quality is second to none. They happen to be the most expensive scooters around. They happen to be the best scooters around.
So Mike, we've looked at the smaller Vespa models. They have the smaller wheels. These ones look different, quite different. They have the same shape in terms of the step through, but they have larger wheels and a lot more to them. Explain more about that.
Well, here's a BV500. This is one of the largest scooters that Piaggio makes. It has, as you can see, a lot different look than the Vespas. The Vespa is a very traditional scooter, but what it shares with the Vespa is a leg shield. So it still has the step-through design,
Yes.
and a comfortable seat, and an aspect of riding that's very vertical. Your back is straight and you're real relaxed. One thing else that's different is the wheel size. Now this scooter is capable of over 90 miles an hour.
Wow.
So in that case, stability is very important.
Yes.
Also, larger wheels seem to handle a little bit better at higher speeds and, surprisingly, at lower speeds. So the steering on this is not as quick as a Vespa in town weaving through traffic, but it's very easy to do it because, again, that added stability of the larger spinning wheel.
Right. So it's got a really nice style about it. It's slightly unusual. Probably many people haven't seen this kind of motorcycle before unless they've been living in Europe for some time. You know, is this a good selling bike because of the difference in styling?
In Europe, this style of scooter is extremely popular. I was in Greece in 2004, and saw a lot of them, didn't know what they were, had never seen anything quite like it before. When I came back to the States, turned out I was selling them about a year later.
Fantastic.
So they were actually a bit ahead of the U.S. deliveries in the two models like this. This is a 500. They also make a 250, which looks very similar.
Right.
The styling of the scooter is really, it's svelte, it's very European as opposed to the more angular Japanese scooters.
Yes.
Neither is good or bad, it's just kind of a matter of taste. This just happens to look particularly nice, I think.
It's kind of a Jetsons look, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
a little bit
that kind of thing. It's like space age.
Retro modern, might you call that?
There you go, yeah. Now, obviously, this looks like it has the same kinds of amenities. It's got these little hooks right here.
Right.
It's got all of the normal switchgear you'd expect for a modern motorcycle, and maybe a larger seat under storage. Please go to episode 3 of On Your Bike.